A knock at the door. I opened it, and there on the threshold stood my husband's mistress with a Louis Vuitton suitcase. "Pack your things. I'm going to live here with Brian now," she declared with a flutter of fake eyelashes. I never thought that at 42, I'd start life anew. My name is Laura Miller, and this is the story of how what you consider unshakable crumbles. I lived with my husband for almost 20 years and believed we had a good marriage. We married young, grew together in our careers, and settled into a 2-story house in Portland's suburbs. It came from my grandmother Eleanor because I was her only granddaughter and the only daughter to my parents. My mom worried when I married Brian and had Thomas, helped as much as she could, knowing a young child requires a lot of care and attention. Thanks to my mom, I left my maternity leave early, got promoted at the law firm, and rarely took sick leave. My mom was always with Thomas. Brian initially supported all my decisions and was even the one who insisted on having Thomas. I very much wanted to have children with the man I loved and hold a small, milky bundle of joy. When our son was very young, Brian was afraid of him, even embarrassed to hold him. As Thomas grew older, they played together. His father took him fishing on weekends in our national park, proudly showing off his little human that barely reached Brian's knee in height. In time, we furnished the house with good furniture from IKEA, bought kitchen and bedroom sets from Pottery Barn, and quality appliances. The latter, given our schedules, greatly simplified life. Not having to wash dishes by hand, just putting them in the dishwasher was a relief. And more so, not having to manually wash clothes, even Thomas's baby things, but rather throwing everything into the washing machine and pressing a couple of buttons. Recently, my husband was promoted. He worked at a large Ford dealership center. Brian enjoyed the paperwork, negotiations, and immersion in car topics. His new appointment as a regional manager involved far more business trips than before. Brian initially lamented leaving me alone for long. Thomas had grown by then, graduated from high school, and successfully passed his SAT exams, enrolling in pre-med at Harvard. Our son loved studying. He called us in the evenings, enthusiastically sharing the fascinating lectures he attended and what new things he had learned. "You know, Laura, we've lived to see the day," Brian joked. "Our personal doctor is growing up. Soon, we won't need to pay for Medicare." I smiled and nodded, proud of our son. His choice to become a physician surprised us at first, but Thomas declared it in 7th grade and held firm until graduation. He got in on his first try, received a partial scholarship, but still had to take out student loans. He worked nights in the university's cafeteria, and I pitied him, occasionally sending small amounts via Venmo, concerned he might exhaust himself juggling work and tough study. Brian was off to yet another trip. "Laura, I'm headed to New York for a Ford conference. Can I bring you back something from Bloomingdale's?" he asked, carefully packing socks into a corner of his suitcase. "No need. We have everything. Even Nordstrom has it all. If I want something, I'll just order it online with delivery." I waved him off, helping him pack. "You're gone for 2 weeks? Can't you leave earlier? You know Steve from head office. He'd rather add a couple of days than let me go early. Plus the commissions are good, so hang tight." I sighed and nodded. He was right, of course. In our youth, his business trips distressed me to the point I wasn't myself without Brian. I miss him now too, worry, but things have become calmer. I've grown used to it. Brian left early in the morning while I was still asleep. He didn't wake me, choosing instead to send a text. "All set. I'm off. Love you." Of course, I couldn't know what was happening in New York at that moment. But later, when gathering the pieces of my shattered life, I was able to piece together the situation from snippets of conversations, messages, and overheard phrases. Here's what actually happened. Brian never went to the Ford conference. Instead, he booked a room at the Marriott in Manhattan and met there with his mistress, Jessica. Their affair had been going on for more than a year. Jessica was an assistant at the dealership center, and their relationship began after a corporate party when Brian drove her home. She was only 26 years old, the same age as our son, making the situation even more distasteful. That evening in the hotel, they had a serious conversation. "Brian, I can't live in your wife's shadow anymore. How long do we have to hide? I want a real relationship, not stolen weekends and fake business trips," Jessica said, pacing the room nervously in a silk robe. "Jess, we've talked about this. I have a son in his first year, family obligations. I can't just throw it all away." "You always find excuses. Either your son was too young or he was prepping, then the first year. When will the right time be? When he finishes med school? Or when he gets married? Or when he has children? You're just a coward, Brian." "I'm not a coward. I just want to do things right." "Right? So cheating on your wife is right, but telling her isn't? What an interesting morality you have." They continued to argue, Jessica's voice rising higher and shriller. Eventually, she issued an ultimatum. "Either you tell Laura everything this weekend, or we're done. And you know what? I can tell her myself. I even know where you live. Maybe I should call her right now?" Brian paled and snatched the phone from Jessica's hands. "Have you lost your mind? Don't dare call her." "Then decide. Right now. Either you go home and tell her the truth, or I'll do it myself." Brian gave in. He booked 2 tickets to Portland. One for himself, one for Jessica. They were supposed to fly out early, but at the last moment, Brian chickened out and tried to talk Jessica out of the trip. She threw a fit, threatened to call me right from the airport, leaving Brian no choice but to get on the plane with her. During the flight, he drank 3 servings of whiskey, trying to pull his thoughts together. Jessica, on the contrary, was excited and full of determination. She discussed with Brian how they'd furnish their new apartment, where they'd vacation, and even which dog breed they'd get. And then he called me from the airport, pretending to still be in New York. His act nearly slipped when I heard the sound of airplanes in the background. "So, have you settled in?" I took a small sip of hot latte from my favorite Starbucks mug. "I'm exhausted. The Delta flight was a tough one. Not as young as I used to be, I guess," Brian admitted. "How about you? Has Thomas called? Is everything okay with him?" "Everything's fine. Don't worry, dear. Tommy's studying hard, brimming with excitement over new knowledge. I wired him some money via PayPal. On the last FaceTime video, it was all ears from the boy left. Let him eat better. He's always on the go, always needs something. Just like you in your youth. A chip off the old block." My husband laughed into the phone. "Miss you both. Want to come home?" "You always said work is work, and I'll wait. Work hard. You'll return, and let's escape to our cabin by Lake Tahoe. It's been ages since we were there. Feels like getting out of the city, even if just for a bit. I'm tired too." "Okay, deal. We'll do that." "All right. I want to sleep now. Good night to you, my Laura." "I think you have some noise in the background." I noticed, clearly hearing the engine noise. "No. Oh well. Spoiled the surprise." My husband was assuredly smiling. "Rushing home by Uber. Conference canceled." I said goodbye to my husband and barely managed to put the phone on the table as the doorbell rang. It was 10:15 p.m. Who could come at such an hour? Then I remembered that my neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, had recently asked permission to drop by in the evenings. Her son married for the third time, moved to his condominium with his new family, and the elderly woman felt lonely, wanting to reach out to people. "No worries about it being late. We'll have a neighborly tea chat. I'm alone too now. Husband in New York, son studying in Boston," I thought as I disabled the alarm and opened the door. At the doorway stood, no, not Mrs. Johnson. A primped-up, heavily perfumed girl with Victoria's Secret fragrances, batting long fake eyelashes, adjusting her lush chestnut hair with California highlights, and firmly clutching the handle of a large Louis Vuitton suitcase on wheels. She wore a tight-fitting red dress, more suited for a nightclub than a visit to a stranger's home, and Christian Louboutin heels with red soles. On her wrist, a gold Cartier bracelet glimmered. Her whole appearance screamed, "Look at how rich and beautiful I am!" "Hello, you must be Laura," the stranger immediately announced, eyeing me with an appraising stare. She appeared a little over 20. Against me, just a girl, closer in age to my son. I stood before her in home jeans and a loose Gap sweater, a typical home outfit for an evening. "Yes, and who are you? Excuse me?" I asked instinctively, crossing my arms over my chest. "Oh, I'm Jessica." She took a step forward as if she were about to enter without an invitation. "Brian and I have been together for a while and love each other." The lady stunned me, smiling widely with bright red lips. I felt a cold wave sweep from my head to my toes. My ears rang, and my mouth instantly dried up. It seemed as if time stopped, and the entire world froze around me. "Excuse me, what?" My voice sounded as if from afar. "Don't pretend you don't understand." Jessica rolled her eyes and tried to squeeze inside. "Brian and I have been together for over a year. He's finally decided to leave this parody of a marriage and start life with someone who truly loves and understands him." I involuntarily took a step back, allowing Jessica to slip into the hallway. She curiously surveyed her surroundings. Not bad for an old house. But of course, Brian and I will furnish our new place much more modernly. All these family photos and old-fashioned knickknacks. It's so last century." She idly waved her hand towards the wall, where our family pictures hung, a 20-year history. "Listen, I don't know who you are or why you're here, but I think it's best you leave." I was starting to come to my senses, with the first emotion being not pain or grief, but righteous anger. "Now I'll be living with your husband. You can begin packing your bags," the cheeky stranger instructed, raising her chin. "Brian said he'd be here in 5 minutes. He wanted to talk to you himself, but I decided it's better if we all meet and civilly discuss the situation. You know, like grown-ups." "Grown-ups? You invade my house in the middle of the night, proclaim you sleep with my husband, and tell me to pack up? And you call that mature behavior?" I felt my voice shaking, not with fear, but with fury. Jessica shrugged indifferently and moved further into the house without removing her shoes, her heels clattering on the wooden floor, which Brian and I meticulously restored 10 years ago. "Well, you know, life happens. People meet. People fall in love." "Brian says your marriage has long become a routine. Just 2 people living under one roof. No passion, no fire. With me, he feels alive again." She spoke as if doing me a favor by explaining simple truths. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "So, you're with Brian, together. And how long has this been going on?" "Oh, over a year. We met at a corporate party. I work at the same dealership center. I'm his assistant. Initially, it was just work relations, but then You know, there's sometimes such chemistry between people that it's impossible to resist. She rolled her eyes dreamily. And all these business trips, they were fake? I was starting to piece together the puzzle. Not all, of course, but many. Jessica smiled broadly. We've had so many wonderful weekends together. Miami, Las Vegas, New York. He's quite the romantic. You're, well, already my Brian. Every word she spoke was like a knife stab. I remembered all those nights waiting for a call from my husband, worrying whether he was okay, not overworking himself on trips, and in that time, he was enjoying his life with this girl. But enough of that. Jessica waved her hand indifferently. Where's your bedroom? I want to have a look before Brian arrives. We need to decide what furniture we'll take and what we'll leave for you. That was it. I felt something snap inside me. Listen to me carefully, Miss What's-Your-Name. This is my house. It belongs to me and my son. Brian here is a guest. And you too. A very unwanted guest, I might add. So, I'd suggest you take your designer suitcase and get out of here before I call the police. Jessica looked shocked. Evidently, she expected me to cry and beg, but not this resolute reaction. You don't understand, she began, but the sound of the door opening interrupted her. Brian stood at the entrance. His face was as pale as chalk, eyes wide with terror. He was looking back and forth between me and Jessica, clearly not knowing what to say. Brian, darling, Jessica exclaimed, rushing to him. I've already met your wife. Very interesting woman. Jessica, what the hell are you doing here? Brian hissed, pushing her away. We agreed I would speak to Laura alone first. Oh, enough with the ceremonies, Jessica dismissed him. I'm tired of waiting and hiding. It's time for honesty amongst all of us. And you're just on time, my dear. I felt my hands shake with anger. I clenched them into fists, digging nails into palms to keep a clear head. Your friend just informed me how you've spent your time on all those business trips. Quite enlightening. Laura, I can explain everything. Brian took a step toward me, but I raised a hand, stopping him. No need to explain anything. It's crystal clear. 20 years of marriage, Brian. 20 years. And you've decided to throw it all away for this? I nodded toward Jessica, who now stood with her hands on her hips. Hey, I'm not this. I have a name, she protested. Jessica, please, be quiet. Brian rubbed his face with his hands. Laura, it's not like that. I got confused. I didn't want it to turn out this way. Oh, didn't want. But somehow you managed to cheat on me with this woman for a year, lie to my face, and now you've brought her into our home? I didn't recognize my voice. It sounded cold and harsh. It was her idea, not mine. I was going to tell you everything calmly. Oh, so now this is my fault? Jessica waved her hands. Maybe next you'll say I seduced you and you're not to blame. Brian, stop squirming. You told me you haven't loved her for a long time, that your marriage was dead, that you finally felt alive with me. I felt as if I'd been punched in the stomach. Air escaped from my lungs but wouldn't come back in. The room began to spin before my eyes. Laura, it's not true. I never said that. Brian rushed to me, but I recoiled. Don't touch me. My voice sounded foreign. Never touch me again. By all means, Jessica scoffed. You know what? I'm tired of this melodrama. Brian, tell her the truth. Tell her we love each other and want to be together. Tell her your marriage is over. Brian stood between us, pale and bewildered. At that moment, he seemed so pathetic, so diminished. Where was the confident man I married? Where was the father of my son, the partner with whom we were building a life?
Laura,
he stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. No need. I raised my hand. Here's how it is. I tried to speak as calmly as possible, deeply inhaling and slowly exhaling, as taught in yoga. The house is in my and Thomas's name. It belongs to me from my grandmother, and Brian, apparently, didn't tell you, dear Jessica, that in our prenuptial agreement, he doesn't even have property rights here. Therefore, I'm not packing bags, you're taking your stuff, calling a new Uber, heading off to live long and happily, and leaving me in peace. Got it? Jessica looked as if she'd been slapped. She turned to Brian, eyes wide with shock. Is it true you have a prenuptial agreement? You never told me. Jessica, I tried to explain it's complicated, began Brian, but she interrupted him. Complicated? Complicated? You said we'd have a house, that we'd start a new life. You promised me a future, Brian. I promised we'd find a solution, but I never said, shut up. Just shut up. Her voice broke into a scream. You're just like all men, liars. I left Jason for you. I believed everything you said. I watched this scene, feeling strangely detached. It was like I was watching a movie, not participating in the destruction of my marriage. Jessica was about to say something to what was still my husband, but he interrupted her with a gesture and only looked at me. Laura, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... It just happened. Yes, stopped by Starbucks for coffee, and a young nymph appeared in my path. I couldn't resist. I added sarcastically. Go. Travel to your mother's in Seattle and tell her the reason. What you traded me and your son for this... I glanced meaningfully at the perfumed girl, pushed my husband from the door, and closed it, promptly enabling the alarm and locking it with 2 locks. They continued knocking and ringing for about 15 minutes. I heard their muffled voices. They were arguing. Then it went silent. Evidently, they called a cab and left. I stood in the hallway with my back against the door, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. That's it. This is the point of no return. Some say mistakes by close ones should be forgivable, but what to do when a mistake makes someone not just no longer close, but a traitor? Apparently, parting is the only way. No alternative. Or continue to endure and carry a load of suspicions that eventually will ruin the relationship? My husband called me all night. My mother-in-law from Seattle did too. I didn't pick up. Sat in the kitchen with a glass of Chardonnay, watched the city lights at night. I told the truth to my son on FaceTime. After all, he was already an adult guy, and he said he would support any decision I made. Another answer from Thomas was not to be expected. He's always been, though resembling his father, a truthful and pure boy. In the morning, I gathered the remainder of Brian's things, planning to return them after my lawyer filed for divorce, which would soon make our separation official. Behind was 20 years of marriage in which I was happy. Yes, there were quarrels, there were hardships, but I was always sure we loved each other and thus would overcome anything. Until last night. Outside, the dawn was gathering strength, and June filled the air with the scent of blooming magnolias. I couldn't cry, just roamed the house like a ghost. Inside was hollow and somehow empty. Already at the lawyer's office showdown, I picked up the phone. Brian called predictably. "Will you forgive me?" Yes, Brian's voice is quiet and somewhat cracked. "No, I can't. Or else it wouldn't be me anymore." I hung up, seeing no sense in continuing the conversation. I had made my decision. A worried Thomas called 2 hours later, saying he'd fly in for the weekend. I tried to persuade him to take money for a Delta ticket, but my son steadfastly said he had saved from side gigs and would spend his savings on the trip. I was glad Thomas was coming. I missed him greatly. As promised, Thomas rushed in Friday evening. Did not ask a thing, but simply offered, "Mom, shall we go to the lake? I almost finished my session, 1 exam left. We'll go today, and then I have 2 weeks of practice at Massachusetts General. I'll return home in July."
"Let's go, sweetheart. Nothing to sit in the city and brood."
We arrived as nightfall was closing in. Didn't have time to organize a barbecue, but switched on the electric fireplace and made baked potatoes with fresh farm salad and organic olive oil. It was tasty. We chatted about everything in the world. I always had a close relationship with my son. He never asked about his father, spared unnecessary queries, trying to amuse me with stories from school, which he had a lot of. I forgot all the grievances over my smiling and such grown-up Thomas. Hardly believable he's all grown up. Time flies, however. Just yesterday, I cradled and sang lullabies. Yet today he's my shoulder and shield, a sea of warmth and light, indispensable after everything that happened.
"Mom, did you sleep at all?"
Thomas entered the kitchen where I sat with a cup of coffee gazing at the misty morning by the lake.
"Hardly at all.
My head buzzed all night, thinking about what's next," I admitted, smiling at my son.
"And what have you decided?"
He sat beside, putting an arm on my shoulder. My goodness, when did my little boy become so grown up and caring?
"I'll file for divorce.
It's decided. 20 years together, and he just, behind my back. With this girl."
"Jessica,"
Thomas finished for me, glaring out the window.
"You knew?"
I turned sharply to my son, nearly spilling the coffee.
"Suspected. Saw them together about a month ago. By accident. I was in Portland over the weekend. Wanted to surprise you, but saw Dad with her at the mall. Holding hands, kissing. Didn't know what to do. Wanted to tell you, but feared it'd ruin the family. Oh, Thomas, you shouldn't have shouldered this burden alone. And you were never, hear me, never to be blamed for destroying our family. Your father did by his actions."
My son hugged me, allowing me to finally cry. Tears flowed down my cheeks, but they were no longer tears of despair, more of liberation. Thomas silently stroked my back, letting me weep.
"You know, Mom, maybe it's for the best,"
Thomas cautiously said when I calmed down a bit.
"You've always been strong, and you deserve honest relationships. Maybe it's a chance to start something new."
"How wise you are, son." I smiled through tears. "You're probably right, though now I can't even imagine any new relationships."
"And don't need to. First, heal your wounds, and I'll always be by your side."
We spent another 2 days at the lake, fished, strolled through the woods, watched old comedies on Netflix. It was exactly what I needed, the simple warmth and support of human connections. Upon returning to Portland, I filed for divorce. The process turned out less painful than I feared. The prenuptial agreement protected my interests, and the house remained mine. Brian didn't resist much. It seemed after the initial shock, he resigned to the situation. Or maybe Jessica insisted on hastening the formalities. I found a new job at a larger law firm where my experience was appreciated. The salary was higher and the team friendly. Gradually, life began to improve. Thomas finished his first year with honors and returned home for the summer. One evening we sat on the porch, sipping lemonade.
"Mom, I met Dad yesterday," Thomas cautiously began. "And how is he?" "Not great. Seems things didn't work out with Jessica. She left him for some Wall Street financier. I remained silent, not knowing what to say. Not that I rejoiced in his failures, but neither did I feel sympathy. He asked to convey his regrets over everything, and if you ever wish to talk. No, Thomas, this chapter of my life is closed. I appreciate that you care about both parents, but some bridges are burned forever. My son nodded, understanding. We finished our lemonade, watching the sunset over the neighboring rooftops. You know, Mom, I'm proud of you, Thomas suddenly said. You could have broken down, but instead you became stronger. I smiled. My boy was right. I indeed had become stronger. And most surprisingly, I was grateful for this painful experience. It taught me to value myself, to defend my boundaries, and to not fear starting anew. Life goes on. Sometimes it offers unexpected and painful lessons, but the main thing is what we learn from them. And if, at 42, I could start with a clean slate, then there are surely many interesting things ahead. I no longer look back, just forward, toward the new day and new opportunities. Did you like the story? Write your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next interesting story. See you tomorrow.